a trusted voice of truth and light.
God gave me a gift. I shovel well. I shovel very well.
And a rally point for those who've accepted the reality that they are not sheep.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the show. I've got some great travelogue stuff coming up here a little bit later in the show. Pictures. Well, maybe I'll post some pictures in the show notes. Today, though, I have Eric Peters from epautos.com back for our weekly chat. Eric, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm geo-fencing my oasis of sanity out here in the woods of Southwest Virginia.
Everybody needs a fortress of solitude in these times, don't they?
This is true. I know. Superman had to go to Antarctica. I mean, I'm lucky that I can still go to the Blue Ridge.
Well, I've actually been a little bit out of the loop for a day or two just because I've been traveling and had my attention elsewhere. You were mentioning before we went on the air that there was kind of a notable protest that took place in New York City. Tell us about that.
Yeah, apparently, according to the news reports I've seen, something on the order of 50 to 70,000 New Yorkers have shut down the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a major thoroughfare to get into and out of the city, over the vaccine mandates and the vaccine passports. There's a lot of resistance, not just in New York, but all over the country to this, and it's percolating upward now so violently that even the corporate press is having a great difficult time trying to suppress it. So I like to talk about this stuff because I think we all need some reason to feel optimistic about the state of affairs in this country, and that's something to feel good about. Interesting.
Well, if there was a time to make a stand, I think this is that time. I was seeing some news that Dan Bongino, who apparently is kind of the heir apparent for Rush Limbaugh.
Cumulus Media. He works for that major media conglomerate.
I understand as of yesterday, he was off the air because he was refusing to take the vaccine. And I don't know if this is, maybe he was on vacation and they were doing a rerun, but he threw down the gauntlet and said, I'm not going to take this vax. And they said, well, anybody who's on the air with us has to be vaccinated.
Well, good for him. And you know what? Who cares if he ends up having to part ways with Cumulus? Look at what Joe Rogan has done. On his own, he has created a podcast that has literally 10 times the audience of CNN.
Wow.
So, if I knew Bonjingo, I would call him up and counsel him to consider pursuing the same. His followers, the people who enjoy his show, they'll go wherever he goes. If he's off the Cumulus airwaves, he'll be able to find his own airwaves, and I think that's what we're all going to have to do, as this thing elaborates. We're just going to have to create our own parallel sanity against this insanity that is being forced down our throats. It's just not something that can be bargained with. It's not something that can be compromised with. We have to say no firmly and refuse to have anything to do with it.
You have a wonderful article that just was published earlier today about negotiating the price or haggling over the price. Talk to me about this article.
Well, you know the old joke, right? Supposedly, this is attributed to Winston Churchill, who, in one of his drunken rampages, approached a woman and asked whether she would sleep with him in return for a large sum of money. And she agreed to this. And then he said, well, how about, and he offered a much lower sum of money, whereupon the woman replied, what sort of woman do you take me for? And he said, well, we've established that. Now we're just haggling over the price. The point being that she had no principles, that it was just about how much it would cost to compromise her principles. And I used that to kind of segue into this business of the masks and the jabs. I've been arguing now for the past 2 years that people who put up with that mask, who said, it's no big deal, I'll just wear the mask, were already saying yes to the jab. You and I were talking about this more than a year and a half ago when all this stuff started. And people would think or would accuse me of being overwrought, hysterical. No, it's not that big a deal. It'll never happen. And now it's happening. And because of the principle, once you give in to something, if you accept something that is a violation of a principle, that's the more violations are going to be visited upon you. It's inevitable because you've lost the ground to stand on when you've already agreed to the thing in principle.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully people understand this or are starting to understand this. I was surrounded by masked people as I was traveling over the weekend. I traveled by air, and I was expecting the worst, Eric. I really thought that, oh my goodness, this is going to be the basically the masked Nazis. I was very happy to find that the airline personnel and most of the passengers I was around were really pretty chill about it. Nobody was scolding anybody, but it was so Orwellian in both of the airports that I was in, and these were major city airports, over and over. These voices keep, coming on the intercom and talking about. It is, a TSA mandate says that everyone must wear this face covering, and it was, I swear, it was every 2 minutes just hammering at you.
Well, they have the same thing at Lowe's and Home Depot in my area. Even though they don't enforce it, they have that soundtrack recording that please maintain social distance and wear a mask unless you have a medical exemption or some such other thing. They're trying to program everybody repeatedly. It will not end until we end it and say enough. And I've been saying that for 2 years, and I'm glad that finally, belatedly, more and more people are also summoning the courage to say it's enough. And I think part of the reason for that is that a jab, unlike a mask, isn't something you can take off. Once they inject you with that, it's in your body, and how do you get rid of that? And it's becoming extremely difficult, even for the corporate press, to suppress the truth that lots of people, we're talking about tens of thousands of people minimally, have been harmed by these vaccines, and specifically young people, and even more specifically young males who seem to be especially vulnerable to this heart inflammation that is being caused by these vaccines. And, it's one thing to say, all right, I'm going to put this mask on to go shop in the store and get my stuff, and when I come out, I'll be able to take the mask off, and it sucks, but I'll do it because I've got my food. It's another thing to roll up your sleeve and subject your health to a risk. And it's another thing beyond that to subject your child to a risk that could prove a life-ending or life-crippling event.
Well, I'm very hopeful when I hear that tens of thousands of people shut down, the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
That to me sounds like there are some cracks beginning to appear in that united front of we must all do this and we're all in this together.
Well, and also further cracks we saw, and they tried to suppress this, the mass walkout by Southwest Airlines people that happened about a week or so ago, and they tried to characterize that as some random event due to glitches in the electronic system of the flight direction systems or because of the bad weather, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't that. It was a mass walkout of people who work for Southwest, making it impossible for them to do business. And Southwest management had to walk back their previously ironclad mandate with no exemptions that you will get the jab. Now they've allowed exemptions. And, while that's not perfect, it is a step in the right direction. The same thing with Delta Airlines. And then there are whole states like Florida where DeSantis has actually put out a $5,000 bonus for any cop who got fired in another state for refusing to roll up his sleeve if they want to come to Florida and be a cop in Florida.
Yeah, I think we're starting. I'm going to in a later part of the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about the word hero and how it's been co-opted. Mm-hmm. But I think the heroes that we really should be focusing on today are probably the ones who are ready to give up their livelihood to be true to principle. That's rare.
No question. A hero is often not the popular guy. A hero is the one who takes the stand that isn't adulated at first, but down the road is appreciated for the courage that it took to take that stand. It's awfully courageous to, say, hide a Jewish kid in your closet in Germany in the 30s, though that person would have been characterized by the authorities and the mainstream in the Germany of that time as an awful ne'er-do-well, as an enemy of the greater German Reich. Just like today, anybody who says anything at all in contradiction to Pope Fauci is considered a menace to society, when in fact they are the heroes, because they are putting their necks on the chopping block, taking risks with their jobs, taking risks with their social standing, and all of the rest of it for the sake of truth. And there's nothing more important than that. If we lose sight of the truth, if we're no longer willing to defend the truth, then all is lost.
No, I hear you. We're coming up on break here in about a minute, but I wanted to just briefly ask you, Fauci is undergoing some pretty good scrutiny right now, particularly in regards to funding of the research at Wuhan labs. Any thoughts that maybe he is vulnerable?
Yeah, I think he's politically vulnerable. My sense of it is that he's become a liability. Despite the effort to deify this guy, and to be fair about it, it was successful for quite some time. He has become something less than savory at this point. He doesn't present well. He comes across as a tyrant, as an authoritarian, and it's starting to wear really thin. I think people are getting tired of him. And, the Biden people, they're engaging in a political calculation. It's not that they're motivated by good intentions. They're looking at it and thinking, is this guy helping us or hurting us politically? And Biden's ratings are in the toilet, even among Democrats. And I think as a result of that, it may be necessary to throw Fauci under the bus.
Okay, well, if they feed him into the sausage grinder, I'm not going to cry too hard, but
me neither.
Neither will I think we're out of the woods. We got to take a quick break. Eric Peters from epautos.com is my guest. You really should check out his website, read the articles, pay attention to the comments, too. Some really smart folks like to read and comment, and it's very civilized, something you don't find in other places.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show. This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Welcome back to the show. Eric Peters from ericpetersautos.com is my guest. Eric, in the first segment, you mentioned a term that I have to admit I'm not familiar with, geo-fencing. Mm-hmm. What on earth is that?
Well, it's the latest elaboration of all of this nannying technology, this Orwellian controlling technology that they're putting into vehicles, and, of course, marketing it as assistance and various other things that sound positive, but they're far from. Geofencing means kind of like what it sounds like. It uses electronics to limit where a car can be driven and how it can be driven. A number of cars already have this, and it's being marketed as an assist for parents who want to make sure that their teenage driver doesn't drive where they don't want them to drive, outside of a certain radius, for example, or don't want them to drive over a certain speed, or simply just want to know what they're up to in terms of how fast they're driving, where they're driving, whether the radio is up loud, all of these things. And I guess you can make a case for a parent wanting to know that about their teenager, but it's an entirely different thing when the government is assuming the role of our parent and treating us as if we were children and supposed to be under their thrall for the rest of our lives, and that's what we're talking about here. I
completely agree. Now, work with me on this one. Why is it so many people, why do they put up with the idea that it's okay to be treated like a child long into their adulthood?
I think it's generations now of conditioning. I've observed this phenomenon for my entire journalistic career. It's safetyism. I call it the safety cult. This obsession with risk aversion. That's another way to put it. The idea that all you have to do to get somebody to submit to something is say, if it saves even one life, if it's dangerous. This obsession with precluding all risks has many manifestations. We're seeing it now with the stuff that's going on with the Rona. Somebody might be sick, so everybody's got to wear a mask. Everybody's got to get jabbed, all this stuff. It just pops out everywhere because the culture and the society bought into this idea that a hypothetical risk is synonymous with an actual harm. And once you accept that, there's no limit to accepting whatever they tell you have to accept in the name of safety, right?
Right. Well, it doesn't usually come all at once. This is the camel's nose coming under the door of the tent. It seems to take place incrementally, but once it's there, it sure seems like this attitude and that overreach on the part of government is very hard to dislodge.
Well, it's kind of like the woke thing. The left people have talked since the 60s about the long march through the institutions. I'm sure you've heard that term. Mm-hmm. And what they mean by that is infiltrating schools, infiltrating the government, infiltrating corporations, and gradually, piece by piece, putting their ideology into places that are critically important in terms of converting the general public to their point of view. It takes a long time for that to happen. And that's what's happened with this safetyism thing. And it's been turned into a quasi-religious virtue to venerate safety. They say it. I mean, it's almost like a call to prayer in Mecca, safety, and everybody goes, one of the reasons it's so effective is because the corollary to it is that if you object to it, that somehow you're a dangerous and reckless person. as opposed to a person who weighs risks against rewards and makes a prudent decision. Life is inherently risky. Getting out of bed has an element of risk. Getting in a car and going to work has an element of risk. Going for a jog has an element of risk. Life is full of risks, but we all make these calculations based on the facts and based on, well, is it more likely to turn out good or bad, right? But when you obsess about everything turning out badly unless you do nothing, or you do some crazy thing to avoid this attenuated hypothetical risk, you become a paralytic. You become a person who is incapable of acting and who is incapable of taking judicious risks to get a worthwhile reward.
I remember years ago getting after one of my kids for doing something. They had, I don't know, they went to fix themselves dinner, and maybe they wanted to make a grilled cheese, and they accidentally started a hot pad on fire, on the stove. They just weren't paying attention. And I was so mad at them, and my wife pulled me aside and she said, I know you want the kids, to know what they're doing, but she says, you also need to understand, you don't want kids who ask permission for everything they do. You don't want kids who sit there with an empty cereal bowl in front of them and cry, I don't know what to eat. And
exactly.
I thought she's right. And I know there's a balance to be struck there. I was pretty upset about the hot pad getting set on fire, but I want to see my kids be self-actualized human beings. And this applies to adults. You treat adults like they're infants. Don't be surprised if you get a society that acts like infants.
Well, absolutely. And that is why, to get back to the car thing, I rail constantly against all of this safety assistance technology because it inculcates passivity in drivers. They come to depend on the car to take action for them rather than opening their eyes, looking around them, judging the situation, and acting according to it. Instead, they just sort of sit there and expect the car to do something for them. And it's, to me, it's a horribly depressing thing on an emotional and psychological level, but ultimately it is a dangerous thing for a culture that buys into that because it leads to completely helpless, dependent people who are looking to be told what to do, and there's always somebody who's looking to tell people what to do.
I'm looking at another article that you had published about your driver safety score, and there's a distinction you make here about how insurance companies try to bribe people. Hey, if you'll just hook up this thing that monitors your driving, you could pay less for your insurance, and it's the assumption that you're a safer driver. You point out, though, there's a difference between being a safer driver and being an obedient driver. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. They will style this as being about safety. Again, we get back to safetyism, but what does that mean? How do you define that? And these insurance companies that want to put in a little electronic narky in your car to keep track of what you're doing behind the wheel, they define safety as obedience to traffic laws, all traffic laws, no matter how arbitrary, no matter how situationally foolish. If you ever go faster than the speed limit, why, you're speeding and you're dangerous. If you accelerate more aggressively, as they put it, then they think prudent, then that too winds up being used as a mechanism to dun you. But you know what? Sometimes it's safe to accelerate rapidly. You see a car bearing down on you at high speed. If you sit there, it's going to run into your rear, right? It's a good idea. It's a good idea to hit the gas and get out of the way, or even swerve out of the way if you have to. So, again, it's all about definitions and who gets to control them. Words matter. Words matter because definitions matter. And if you let the wrong definition go unchecked and unchallenged, you wind up being put into this corner where you're obliging yourself to do something that's completely contrary to the proper meaning of whatever the term of the word is.
Yep. I think you've influenced me greatly on my understanding of what it means to be a responsible driver. And following the traffic laws may be a part of it, depending upon the situation, but there may be times where the traffic laws they don't fit a particular situation.
Sure, and there's an element or degree of subjectivity there, and I like to go by things that are objective and incontestable. So my metric for determining whether a person is a good or safe driver is simply, do they or do they not cause accidents? If you've got a person who has been driving for 20 and 30 years, who's never had an accident, has never had a claim filed against them, I don't care how fast they drive. I don't care if they accelerate, quote unquote, aggressively. Clearly, they're competent and skilled, and they're making the right decisions behind the wheel. At some point, I think the objective, inarguable record of a person not having wrecked and not having had accidents trumps these hypothetical assertions about how if you drive faster than the speed limit, you might have an accident.
Yeah, more of the safetyism. Eric, we're up against the clock here. Tell people where they can find your website.
Sure, it's epautos.com, and as I like to characterize it, it's the web's best libertarian gearhead site. And what I mean by that is it's a place to go if you like cars and if you like politics and philosophy, also if you like motorcycles, or if you just have a general question, if not particularly interested in cars as other than a means to get from A to B, but you've got a problem or a question, I'm happy to try to help you out with that.
I learn a lot every time I visit your site. I'm not necessarily a gearhead, but I really like what I learn, and it's this is intelligent discussion, something that is not always easily found. Eric, thanks
Thank you,
so
Bryan.
much.
That's very kind of you.
Thanks for being my guest.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show. This is the Bryan Hyde Show. Hi, welcome back to the show. So glad you could join us today. I want to give a quick shout out to my sponsors, including LifesavingFood.com. You have heard me talking about, of course, the importance of getting your food storage in order, self-sufficiency. Yeah, it makes sense. I think to most people it does. And if it didn't, it's making sense more and more by the day. And I wanted to pass this on. Kendall, who is the owner of LifesavingFood.com, said that there are major backups right now in the supply chain. And so it's kind of hard to tell sometimes what items are going to be in stock or not in a timely manner. And he asked me to please just mention this to you so that you understand. You can order food storage through LifesavingFood.com, but you need to understand, due to supply chain shortages, these orders could take upwards of a month to arrive. Now, that shouldn't stop you. That shouldn't dissuade you from getting food storage and maintaining your food storage program and, building on it and so forth. It's just, this is one of the areas it's finally starting to catch up, and people are starting to see, those delays. But if it's time to do it, it's time to do it. Better to get it sooner than later, because later may be too late. You can just click on the link in the show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com, and Kendall will take it from there and give you a nice discount, too. Still offering that discount. But, this is an interesting thing to see developing right in front of us. So let's talk for a moment about heroes. And I know this is kind of a touchy thing, or at least it always has been in the past. Anytime I bring up heroes, what is a hero to one person may just be, a sacred cow, in the eyes of another. Yeah. You're gonna tell me about your hero. But I want to just ask you to consider this. I'm not saying this is the only way to see it, but does it sometimes seem like the word hero has been shifted out of its original meaning? And I'll give an example of what I mean. So when someone was lauded as having done something heroic, there was a time when that referred to a person who did something extraordinary, above and beyond what was expected of them. To where, it was something truly, inspirational. Maybe they did it at great personal risk. It's funny, people have, these terrorists out there, they don't even care. They just blow themselves up. They don't even care about their lives. They're just suicidal. They don't even care. And yet, you look at the Medal of Honor citations for a lot of, military heroes, and I'm talking legit heroes, with zero disregard for his own life, or with complete disregard for his own life. He charged the enemy pillbox and knocked it out. Hopefully you see the point. There can be a subjective call to heroism. That's all I'm saying. And yeah, to some people, a suicide bomber may seem like a hero. I mean, they throw celebrations for them, some of those cultures where that's a common thing. Now, here's the other part, though. We've twisted the word hero into something that has come to mean somebody who works for the government. And I'm talking primarily Hollywood. You look at most of the TV shows or the movies. Who is the protagonist? Who's the good guy? Well, typically it's, this cop. Now, he may be kind of rogue, he plays by his own rules, but or it's this FBI agent, or it's this spy, or it's this, military intelligence official. But the bottom line is the state, government, at all levels, has co-opted that word. And we saw this a great deal during the Second Gulf War particularly. These are heroes. The people, the first responders, after 9/11. Everybody who puts on the uniform is a hero. I want you to hear me very closely because I'm not saying it's all fake. They're all phony. There are some legitimate heroes out there. In their police cruisers, on the fire trucks and the ambulances, and in the emergency rooms and so forth. There are some people who will do truly heroic things in the course of their work. And I think they deserve recognition for that. But simply putting on a uniform and showing up for work, that's doing your job. That's not heroic in and of itself. And I understand, for some people that is like nails on a chalkboard. Brian, you are questioning one of the major foundations of our freedom and our society, Look at our society, look at our state of freedom right now, and tell me that everything's just great. Yeah, it's cool, it's all good. No, there's some semantics being played here. And there's another aspect of heroes that is even more touchy. But, got look around, and here I go. Let's talk about this. Got a great article here from William Sullivan. This is published on AmericanThinker.com. Actually, it's AmericanThinker.com. A culture that celebrates fake heroes while crucifying real ones cannot endure. Now, I had a pretty long setup on this, but I want you to understand this is not about just trying to drag everybody through the mud. It's trying to differentiate between what we once understood to be truly heroic. And by the way, I gotta throw this in here. Sometimes the really heroic stuff is stuff that never makes the newspapers. The family, the young family that is dealing with a mom, who's been diagnosed with breast cancer, and they're trying to make things work, and they're trying to hold it together while she's fighting a life-threatening illness. This is some really heroic things done there. People who sacrifice to rescue children from the foster care system or from human trafficking and so forth. So just understand, there are some heroic things that are sometimes done very quietly, but just because it didn't make news doesn't make it any less heroic. But let's talk about some of the icons that are developing right now. William Sullivan starts by reminding us that Nike told consumers back in 2018, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And he says the advertisement featured former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. Sorry, I've never said his name right because I don't watch football. Giving a stoic stare to those social justice warriors being spurred to buy the company's product. And what may be the swiftest example of the Mandela effect taking hold on the American cultural psyche, many Americans believe that Colin Kaepernick was headlong into a promising NFL future when he boldly decided to take a knee during the national anthem in order to protest police brutality. And for this crime against the politicians and the status quo, he was ostracized by the racist NFL and its fans. Now, Sullivan says the broad belief in this myth is a lot more pernicious and a lot more destructive than innocently misremembering that the Monopoly man wears a monocle. And he says it's almost certainly a myth. Because the reality is, on August 26, 2016, Kaepernick decided to sit on the bench during the anthem, not kneel. Oh, and now that you mention it, that does seem to line up with how things played out. Now, there was nothing ostentatious. In fact, there was something almost childish about it. Maybe he didn't like being benched for Blaine Gabbert, who, according to Mike Foss at USA Today, was possibly the worst quarterback employed by the NFL at the time, before he goes on to explain that he might have actually been the second worst quarterback, only behind the horrendously bad Kaepernick in 2015. Now, Sullivan points out in his article, he says this wasn't the first time that Kaepernick sat during the anthem. It was the first time, though, that reporters seemed to have been struck by it enough to ask him about it. And when asked why he didn't stand, he famously said, I'm not going to stand up and show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. Now, of course, the BLM, the MSM, and the SJWs rejoiced, of course. There were many critics, but the NFL didn't censure or oppress him in any way. They issued a statement saying the league encouraged but didn't require standing for the anthem, and the team and coach supported him. And eventually he got a shot in the 2016 regular season and earned about $17 million for his trouble playing in 11 games. Unfortunately, the 49ers only won one of those games, and he went into free agency after that terrible season as the league's most inaccurate passer of the previous 2 years, with nearly a quarter of his passes statistically categorized as off-target passes. That's a very nice way to say that. And what followed was a series of business decisions, and Sullivan says we shouldn't deceive ourselves to imagine it's anything more. If Kaepernick were a better quarterback in 2017, he would likely have found a professional home as a 29-year-old free agent. Of course, if Colin Kaepernick were a better quarterback in 2016, maybe he wouldn't have sat down during the anthem at all. So NFL teams faced a choice in 2017 which could only be described as a catch-22. Should they embrace the circus that comes with rostering this guy, thereby opening themselves to accusations by the media who might suggest that his lack of play would be a function of his political stance or his race rather than performance? Or should they pass on the opportunity to roster such a potentially serviceable backup that comes with these kind of risks in tow? And Kaepernick faced a similar business decision. He could either focus on football and potentially be a backup for a few more years, or he could launch a career as a prominent leader in the popular social justice movement. Both the NFL and Kaepernick opted for the latter choices. The NFL was accused of racism for not rostering him, and Kaepernick was hailed as a martyr for the cause of social justice. We're going to dig a little bit deeper just the other side of the boat. Please stay with us. This is the Bryan Hyde Show. This is the Bryan Hyde Show. All right, welcome back to the show. Sharing with you an article from AmericanThinker.com. This was written by William Sullivan. A culture that celebrates fake heroes while crucifying real ones cannot endure. And this is kind of a broader discussion on heroism. I beat this drum before, and I'm not trying to convince you this is the only way to see it. But I am going to just ask you to consider, what if the word hero is being co-opted and turned into something that really doesn't reflect heroism, doesn't reflect, for instance, something that goes above and beyond what a normal human being or a normal person would do. In fact, it doesn't even necessarily apply to the human realm anymore. A few years back, there was a story about a police dog that was killed in the line of duty. This was on the Coronado Bridge down south of San Diego, and the suspect was chased onto the bridge, and his car crashed, and they got it stopped right there on the bridge. And anyway, they sent a canine to take him down, and the guy grabbed the police dog and went over the side of the bridge. And that's like a 200-foot fall to the water below. The felon, the guy the criminal they were after, he survived. The police dog did not. But the police dog was given this incredible hero's funeral with full military honors and so forth. And I'm not trying to diminish this dog's death. Please don't be angry with me. But the dog was simply doing what it was trained to do. Get him. That's all. It's tragic that this guy chose to try to escape and take the dog with him, and it's tragic that this magnificent service animal died. But I don't think a person could make the case that, well, heroically, the dog, knowing the risk, still, did its job, even though there was a possibility that some harm could come to it. The dog didn't understand that. It was just doing what it was trained to do. And as regrettable as its death may be, why did the state of California do the big, full-blown pageantry and military honors for a dog? I'm not trying to make you angry, but I am asking you, can we think about this at just a little bit deeper level? Back to William Sullivan's article. He's talking about Colin Kaepernick and the NFL. And he says, here's the thing. The NFL was accused of racism For not rostering Copernic, Copernic was hailed as a martyr for the cause of social justice, but here's the rub. Copernic believed in a myth that police officers are gunning down minorities in the streets and that America is a hateful, racist place that requires socialism to absolve it of its past sins. That's the worldview or the mindset that was culturally popular and fiercely defended by much of the public and the government, and nearly all of the media and academic institutions of the time. Now that idea, however incorrect, was not only popular, but it was clearly gaining steam. 2 years later, Nike inked a deal with Copernic that was sweeter than anything he could have earned in the NFL. And 4 years later, oh look at this, the NFL hailed him as a hero too, when Roger Goodell reached the conclusion that believing in something had made Colin Kaepernick richer, and it could also make the NFL richer. Hashtag me too. Sorry, maybe that was inappropriate. Well, whether Roger Goodell is right about that, time will tell, but William Sullivan says, I still contend the NFL's best days are far behind us. In short, however, Kaepernick had already made millions before deciding to use his reigning sports celebrity to launch a career as a political activist, in which he's much more successful than he ever was as a football player. So, good move, Colin. That was good. He risked nothing by taking up the position of social and political status quo. In fact, he got a whole lot richer by doing so. And while we might call that a good business decision on his part, it isn't really heroism or bravery. But you know who actually is a hero? Washington State Police Trooper Robert LeMay, who actually defied the government and the social status quo and sacrificed his livelihood in order to defend the rights of his individual health autonomy and by extension others against the medical tyranny of his state. After working 22 years in public service to Washingtonians, working through the pandemic without a vaccine, the government was now demanding that he inject a vaccine into his body, which undoubtedly introduces unknown health risks in order to mitigate health risks that are known to be minimal for the vast majority of people. Yeah, he stepped away from a career that could have a very solid retirement. Respect. I mean, he would be seen, as long as he has that uniform on, he's going to be seen as a hero. He stepped away from it because he wouldn't be forced to take the vaccination. I know there are people who say, it was just showboating, this was all self-serving. Okay, fine. I mean, if that's how you want to portray it, but when's the last time you stepped away from your livelihood, stepped away from security, took the rougher road because it was the right thing to do, and according to your conscience? That's a heroic move, even though there are people who strongly may disagree with it. And William Sullivan says, you know who else are heroes? All the other officers in that state and around the country who are doing the same thing. They truly believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything. Think about the Southwest Airlines employees who took a stand against the unconstitutional vaccine mandates being threatened by the corrupt executive currently occupying the White House. And their employer that had chosen to goose step in sync. They are heroes. They are heroes. They believed in something, even if it meant sacrificing everything. But guess what? Southwest has backed down from the threats to fire unvaccinated employees as a result. Hospital workers around the nation, they worked through the unknowns of the deadliest pandemic on this young millennium and were heralded as heroes. But they believe so fervently in the individual right to make health decisions that they are resisting the mandatory injection of a vaccine to offset a risk that they know to be infinitesimal for them. Now they're cast as villains. They're heroes just months ago for believing in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. William Sullivan says these are true heroes, and the vast majority of their names we'll never know. I think he has a point here. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because there's a very real possibility you may have to make a similar heroic decision that's not going to make the papers. You know, likely you and maybe just a few people in your circle of influence are actually going to be aware of it. But you gotta be that person. As hard as it is, each of us needs to be the kind of person who is willing to walk away from that security, walk away from the adulation, if it means doing the right thing. Kind of a little different spin, huh? Bryan Sullivan says in a world where we're unable to even declare that gigantic and world-shaping figures like Christopher Columbus or Thomas Jefferson are heroes, and our world is the greatest it's ever been for its human denizens and has become exponentially more so in these last few hundred years, thanks to men like Columbus and Jefferson. He says we shouldn't be surprised that the same influences denigrating our heroes are the ones elevating the voice and visage of Colin Kaepernick. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, unless, of course, your belief isn't aligned with popular opinion, academia, the media, corporate initiatives, or government medical decisions made in your best interest. Now that would be a more honest campaign slogan for Nike and the woke legions of America, but it doesn't have quite the same effect, does it? So you're saying the truth is that heroes exist all around us. But not just on TV or playing games for our amusement or sitting in the White House or Congress deciding how to spend your unborn great-grandkids' presumed talent and wealth. No, he says in this case, they're ordinary people, willing to sacrifice everything because they believe in something. In this case, that something is the timeless principles of liberty, limited government, individual autonomy. Not just for them, for everyone. And while the social justice warriors may find, the social justice warriors could find strength in Colin Kaepernick, we can find strength in the actual heroes that we see around us. So William Sullivan says when this moment of government-imposed terror subsides, we can only pray that they may be recognized as such. But to all of these real American heroes, he says, I wish to say, thank you. You give us strength every day so that we might be valued enough to follow. That's the reason I wanted to share this article with you. And I have a link to it in the show notes. I hope you'll check it out. It's not just, hey, you should recognize and maybe do something for these heroes. It's also a matter of you and I need to be the kind of people who know where we stand and are willing to be heroic in our own right. It's a tall order, and it's scary. Nobody wants to be the one that people are pointing fingers at and saying, man, they ought to throw you out. Or take your job away. Hey, our show is brought to you in part by great sponsors every day, including the head attorney team at Patriot Home Mortgage, LifesavingFood.com, and also the good folks at MonticelloCollege.org. Links to these sponsors in the show notes at theBryanHydeShow.com. Thanks so much for joining us. This is the Bryan Hyde Show.